I've been watching a lot of Dwarf Fortress videos recently, a game I admittedly don't play, but I just enjoy the stories because Dwarf Fortress, on top of being an elaborate sandbox of near infinite possibility, is perhaps most famous for its emergent storylines, which evolve from its dynamic, generated worlds. Some of these stories evolve out of something known as community succession games, where players will pass a save along and form a narrative across their playthroughs. Boat Murdered, a pretty well-known example, was recently covered in this Down the Rabbit Hole video by Frederick Knudsen. It was this video that got me thinking, why don't we do things like this for CK3? A dynastic game that is very much about its emergent storylines through player and AI choices. Therefore, I took to my Discord, sent out a call to arms, and after much debate and haranguing, mostly getting people who actually owned all the DLCs, which was my bad, I managed to get together 8 individuals, myself included, to see what sort of story we could come up with in the world of Crusader Kings 3. I gave each of us free reign to do whatever we wanted in a 10-year period, or about an hour or so each, to see what sort of storylines we could create with custom landless adventurer Gottfried Krieger. Though we had no particular goal in mind besides maybe joining the Byzantine Empire, things didn't always go as we planned. Still, I think you'll be entertained, so sit back, relax, and enjoy as we unravel the tale of House Krieger, starting with me, Soul Tomato. So this is Gottfried again. He's a 400-point character. I'm going to be narrating this after the fact. I did not do it during the video, which was my bad. But my idea was to try to play over here in the Byzantine Empire and try to become a landed Byzantine admin family, because a lot of the people on my Discord had never played admin before, and I thought it would be funny. So that was basically where we started out here. And then obviously, just setting up your initial run here, grabbing some characters. The narrative is going to shift from gameplay focus halfway through, or actually like pretty much right after this part. So for those of you who are curious how I'm going to be presenting this, if you've ever seen one of my lore videos, it's going to be a lot like that. I decided to do a Swords for Hire build because it just made sense. We're trying to see glory and adventure and maybe potentially some land, and I feel like Swords for Hire is probably the best way to do that if you want to make money. So not much to speak of, really, in the early days of this run. I got ill and wounded, and I remained that way for quite a while, and I decided to go up north to the Kingdom of Hungary because there really weren't that many contracts in Byzantium. I did like a couple settle boundary disputes and failed a couple other things, and I decided to leave. This character is also married. He started off with a wife. I'm not sure why, because I don't remember selecting a wife. Maybe it was just random, but yeah, he's got like a 30-year-old wife, and so we're heading north to the Kingdom of Hungary to see if our prospects can improve, because, we're just trying to make money and hopefully not waste all of my 10 years. Thankfully, up here in Hungary, we do manage to recover our wounds and finally succeed in some contracts. I was having no luck, again, like I said, in Byzantium. I was also failing contracts like left and right. It was absolutely awful. And I think this is when we get our first camp upgrade, which is the Barber's Tent, mostly because people kept getting sick with disease and I kept getting ill and injured, so I figured it was a smart thing to do. This character also learns a couple languages. The second one I think is Greek, so he's Germanic, so I think he knows like Middle German or High German or something like that. But now he also knows Greek because we were in Byzantium, and I kind of thought that would play into his character later on. Working on swaying my camp because, you get I was going to say a cacophony, a cornucopia of different peoples that you have to make play nice together. But here in Hungary, mostly just doing contracts, enforcing, doing a little hired muscle, just, the normal stuff, trying to make money. I was mostly trying to set it up for people to succeed after the fact. I didn't have any grandiose plans here. But I am ever the greedy optimist, so I did try to do this Stand With Us contract, and this was to my detriment because I did not have enough troops. I think I only have 100 light skirmishers. And to further illustrate that, as you can see, I get absolutely annihilated here and then captured. And the terrible thing about this is that this actually went on for like 3 in-game years. So I got captured by these people, couldn't do anything, and had to wait for this faction war to end. I was basically just trying to, I think it was like a liberty war, but I got captured, and Gottfried spent 3 solid years of his life imprisoned and wounded, by the way, so it was not a great time. Once free, the years have passed, I decided to just do more contracts here in the Kingdom of Hungary, just because the work was plentiful. There was no reason to leave. It was mostly just collect contracts, do stuff. Again, the same thing that you always do. You collect money, you try to improve your camp, things like that. I think this is around the time we get our second building, which I believe is a proving ground. That's usually what I go for. Again, I'm watching this after the fact, so I'm not sure. Yeah, Proving Ground was our second building. There you go. This is probably the single most significant event that happens in this run, especially because of what happens after it. So obviously the Crusades are beginning. The very first, or not the first Crusade, I'm sorry, but one of the Crusades. We're going to try to retake Jerusalem. And immediately after this, we get this Against the Wayward for the Latin Empire. Like, try to overthrow the Byzantine Empire during the Crusade. And I thought this was a brilliant idea because I'm like, well, I want to play in Byzantium. I already know Greek. This is probably the perfect segue for me to try to do this. I've also never actually done this. It's never popped up for me. As you just saw that message, that disobedient child message, keep your eye on that. That's going to come up again. It's going to come up a lot. It's going to come up so much it's almost comical. I ended up getting a bug where he would repeatedly send me these, and every person for the next 80 years of gameplay would get this message. And it's very odd. It's a very weird circumstance, but I'll explain why in a second. But the war kicks off, the Crusade for Jerusalem, and interestingly, because of the AI changes, they actually all decided to, or the AI, I should say, decides to gather in Rome now. They don't just like go straight to the Holy Land in little bunches. So this is really cool. But eventually we make it to the Holy Land, and I'm still getting the letters, and we start participating in some battles, and we have some really nice early success here. I was actually quite shocked, because normally I feel like they come down here and they just start getting annihilated. But I ended up being in the battle, and I think I ended up being the commander for this one against Saladin. So canonically, Godfried has battled Saladin in his history, and he has beaten him in battle. So I just want you guys to add that to his tally that you eventually might have for this character. And so the war is going okay so far. Everybody's kind of spread out, still getting these messages. Absolutely annoying as hell. They happen like maybe every minute or so. Just trying to, collect the land, trying to siege things down as fast as possible to stay afloat here. I'm obviously losing people like crazy to attrition. I have like 90 troops. This is going to come up as a problem for the next player, but for right now we're doing okay. And then obviously we have Saladin chilling right there with only 10,000 troops. And so once we take this, if I'm not mistaken, I think I tried to turn around. We got this character coming in, another victory for our boy, and then another one popped up here. So we're at 74% war score. And we have Saladin coming in here again for I think a second time. Or no, he goes off. Okay, yeah, that's right. So he goes off. I'm still getting the letters. I've got all these people coming in. We got these great battles going, these great victories, and I assumed, on my end, that this would be fine. So now the war's at 75%. We're winning. We've knocked them down really nicely. And I figured that this was in the bag. And then before we wrap this up and jump to the next person, I realized there were a couple things that I missed along the way, so I do want to give you some minor updates. One, I did have my first child. His name is Sigurd, I believe is what I ended up naming him. So the first Krieger boy, he's here. He's on the map. We got him. And I could have sworn that there was more to that, but the reason that I keep getting those messages about being the disobedient child, if you were wondering, what happened was, and I don't know why I can't find the footage for this. I parsed through this thing like 3 times. But basically what happened was that lady that we were fighting the war for, she ended up dying of an illness before it even started, but the game never registered that. And I tried to look for it, but I couldn't quite, it wouldn't pop up. But she died before the war started, so basically what happened was it invalidated the war before it began, but the game didn't invalidate it, and so the Pope thought we were still doing the war. And so he kept sending me the letters, and the game kept doing this for the entire 80 years of the run. So this is going to come up again, and I really liked that some players incorporated it into their gameplay a little bit. But basically, just for the next parts, if you've ever seen one of my lore videos, that's kind of how this is going to be playing out. I'm going to be using the barbershop and the map to articulate the notes that they wrote. If you want to read these transcripts in full, like basically their battle reports or their gameplay reports, you can do that on my Discord. But we're going to come up to the second player now. Our second succession participant was Paladin channel member Zora Luigi. Though we left Godfried in the Crusade with a hefty war score advantage at the end of my section of the video, the war quickly turned sour for Zora Luigi. In February 1189, Godfried and his troops, heavily depleted but motivated by their success in the Holy Land, attached themselves to the first army of Auxerre of the Kingdom of France, but after some minor skirmishes lost track of them in the chaos and were cut down nearly to the man on August the 1st of the same year. Godfrey, depleted and bruised, was forced to return to camp in Hungary to resupply. After solidifying himself as an overseer on the 30th of October 1189, Godfried resupplied and with fresh recruits in tow, began the long trek back to the Holy Land before being completely and utterly routed for a second time on the way back near Acre on the 26th of February 1190. For the next 5 years, Godfried and his Wolves of the Blade, from here on known as Wolves for brevity, attempted to return to the Holy Land. Also, I realized I never mentioned what the name of his regiment was. It's the Wolves of the Blade. Amidst this chaos, on the 25th of April 1190, Godfried and his wife Maria welcomed a daughter, Agatha. Setbacks, to include a disease in Hungary, forced them to relocate to Transylvania in June of 1191. There, Godfried, his supplies and coin diminished, remained in the local area working on contracts. Tragically, the same could not be said for Maria, who died of pneumonia on the 20th of August, 1194. Widowed, battered by war and disease, and low on supplies, Godfried remained surprisingly resolute and determined to return to the war, and with 500 men, the most he could muster with his current supplies, marched south one final time towards Jerusalem on the 22nd of December, 1194. Sadly, he would arrive too late to offer substantial aid, participating in only minor skirmishes before the crusade ended in defeat on the 28th of March, 1195. Defeated and without prospects after the war, Godfrey and his wolves returned to Constantinople on the 20th of November 1195. There he married a camp follower named Clara on October of 1196. He remained in Constantinople for the remainder of Zora's run, doing contracts, and just before concluding was called by the Prince of Cilicia to defend his lands against the dual encroaching of the Abbasids and local warlords on the 8th of October 1198. Oh, and by the way, that Pope, yeah, he's still sending those messages. His messengers have an endless reach. This will come up again. Our next participant was Omango, and for their run we found Godfrey initially in Cilicia, where he had his doubts about the prince's prospects facing two enemies in two separate wars. But after a grand victory by Godfrey and his wolves on the 7th of September 1199 against a combined army of two separate lords, the war ended with Cilician victory, and Godfrey and his men were richly rewarded, turning their eyes east to the Goliaths that were the encroaching Abbasids. But as luck would have it, in February of the year 1200, the Ayyubids toppled the Abbasids, nullifying the legality of the contract the Wolves of the Blade had signed with Cilicia to protect them against the Abbasids. Though the Prince of Cilicia quickly scrambled to draft a new contract, Godfrey took this opportunity to depart for the Kingdom of Georgia, arriving on the 26th of May, 1200. Along their journey to Georgia, Godfrey took stock of his children, noting with some disappointment that his son Sigurd seemed to be growing up malicious and cruel towards animals, but doted on his daughter Agatha, who seemed to be every bit the apple of her father that her brother wasn't, quickly becoming his favorite child. Over the next 2 years, he would befriend both his wife Clara over their love of storytelling and his daughter Agatha after letting her win in a competitive hunt for a pheasant. Thereafter, Gottfried completed his study of the Magyar language, his third known language, and made camp just outside of Krakow in the Kingdom of Poland on the 16th of July, 1202. While in Poland, Gottfried began studying Polish and collecting contracts with the local nobility, the most notable of which occurred on the 5th of May, 1203, when the Countess Ryszeza of Wolgast decided to press her claim on the County of Wolin under Count Boleslav II. The Wolves arrived late to the war and found that most of the Wolgastian forces had already been routed, with the Wolnonians sieging the city of Wolgast. With careful maneuvering and cunning, Gottfried and the Wolves managed to draw the Wolnonians away from the city and defeated them in a decisive battle despite being outnumbered 3-1. While sieging Castle Wolnin with the main Wolgast force, rumors from the east trickled in of some distant Khan claiming he would conquer everything under the sky. The Wolgast-Wolnin War ended on the 25th of March, 1205 with Wolnonian victory. Gottfried earned much acclaim for his efforts, but the old warrior knew that peace meant low prospects, and gathered his camp for another journey, this time further north to Plock. Along the way, on the 25th of May, 1205, his old friend, longtime bodyguard, and second Yol passed away in his sleep at the age of 61. That same year saw terrible strife in Poland, as the 15-year-old Countess Magdalena of Schersk declared open rebellion against the king of Poland's cousin, Duke Leszek of Mazovia. Gottfried, ever the risk-taker despite his age, decided to gamble on the young countess and offered her his aid in the war, hoping for a hefty reward should she win. A gamble that would prove costly. For on the 13th of March, 1206, a battle that would go down in history as the slaughter of Lomza occurred. The rebel forces, 4,000 strong, were situated at the castle Lomza in siege when an army of 10,000, aided by the King of Poland himself, arrived, encircling and decimating the imposing force. Gottfried, his family, and their closest allies barely escaping with their lives. As he looked back on the carnage, the old wolf wondered if it wasn't time to hand over the reins to his camp favorite Agatha. His son Sigurd had murdered a man by then, and had already been disinherited, but was kept around for fear that he would do more harm to the world if set loose. Agatha, however, had grown to become a capable young woman. Reaching adulthood on the 6th of April, 1206, the future of the wolves to Gottfried's mind seemed bright under her ever-capable hands. On the 30th of March, 1206, Gottfried and Clara amazingly welcomed his second daughter, Ulrich, and shortly after, the Wolves of the Blade arrived in Prussian Bohemia, not far from Gottfried's homeland. Though initially swearing off battle after his humiliation at the slaughter of Lomza nearly 2 years before, Gottfried received a letter from Duke Humbert of Savoy to aid in a liberty war on the 5th of February, 1208, and with that famous cunning still buried somewhere deep inside, the old wolf penned his agreement, and the Wolves of the Blade gathered under their aged captain for another campaign. Omango's campaign ended on the 1st of December, 1208. For the past 3 months, Gottfried and his men have been successfully battling the rebels on the side of Duke Humbert, with scattered pockets of resistance all that remained of the opposing force. With an easy war under his belt, Gottfried wonders then if this isn't his final ride after all. Perhaps there is something to look forward to in the days to come. As he looks over the camp, spotting Agatha drilling troops and his young Ulrich laughing at the armory tent from afar, he can't help but smile. No matter what tomorrow brings, right now, he's exactly where he should be. Right now, he is content. Our next participant, Dwayne the Rock Lobster, is another one of our channel Paladin tier members and decided to incorporate Pope Callistus III's bug of sending messages about a crusade for Byzantium that ended before it began almost 2 decades ago in the narrative. I told you it would come up again. On the 15th of January, 1209, Gottfried has received 2 missives from the Pope in roughly a fortnight, the same message he had received for nearly 20 years. The 87-year-old man had escaped death time and time again to haunt the wolves every step. Duke Humbert's War, which we left at the end of Zora Luigi's run, ended nearly a year after it began on December 1209. After a few failed campaigns in northern Poland, Godfrey in September 1210 decided to move his camp south to warmer Genoa, where they arrived after a brief holdover in Marin on the 24th of March 1211. On the 21st of April 1211, the 90-year-old Pope still haunts the wolves every step. His letters, rubber-stamped and delivered without fail to the wolves' camp, no matter the distance and no matter where they hide. Godfrey sent missives far and wide to wise men, wondering if there wasn't something to glean from the identical notes, but even the local wise and madmen alike could only feign a guess. To further this unfortunate development, news reached the camp that the Empire of Maghreb had taken over the Kingdom of Sicily, and Muslim hordes were practically knocking at the gates of Rome. After a life of wandering and thorough enjoyment of the warm ocean air, Godfrey decided he would take on the customs of the Genoan people and become Cisalpine. For this bold claim, he was mocked and challenged by a young lord to a duel, a challenge he quickly dispatched, earning much renown from the nobility and peasantry alike. Godfrey would remain in the Genoan area for the remainder of Dwayne's run. There he would learn of the death of the great enemy of Christendom, Saladin, and the ascension of his son to the Ayyubid throne. In Genoa, Godfrey would witness the union of his daughter Agatha to his longtime bodyguard and friend Sylvester on the 2nd of January 1216, a union he was only too happy to grant and prayed it would bring his beloved child much joy. While trekking through the Alpine in the year 1216, hoping against hope to escape the hounds of the still living Pope Callistus III, Godfrey took ill, and many in the camp feared after a poor treatment he would not live to see the following summer. A fear compounded by the announcement by Agatha of a coming child. But God be good, Godfrey witnessed the birth of Enrico, his grandson, on the 24th of April, 1217, and recovered from his long-time illness, weak but alive, in August of the same year. Missives from the Pope continued to trickle in as the Mad Pope, now 97 years old, continues to haunt the wolves and Godfried. On the 24th of June, 1218, Godfried received a request for aid, and as of the 1st of December 1218, the wolves look out at the great city of Pisa, besieged by his forces and those of his allies who wish for independence. Our next player was longtime Discord member Scatterman, who began play sieging the capital of the Republic of Pisa, a war not long for this world. On the 19th of December 1218, Doge Obizo of Pisa captured the rebel leader, ending the conflict, bringing new shame to the pile of Godfried's mounting list of defeats. He wondered briefly if his days of glory were truly behind him, but with one last push of stubborn pride, Godfried and the wolves headed east for the final time, to the land of the Eastern Romans, where they arrived on the 23rd of July, 1219, having lost his camp physician and beloved stooge to apoplexy along the way. Godfried, unimpressed by the Greek lords and their soft bodies, could not deny that they still knew how to drill their fighting men, some of which he recruited for his forces alongside a new young bodyguard named Aristarchus, the two becoming fast friends. On the 5th of May, 1220, Godfried found the strangest lord he had ever come across, a man bearing a striking resemblance to a murderer named Otto that Godfried had imprisoned and thrown into the sea years before. The Otto lookalike mayor offered to sing a song for Godfried and his men, to which they readily accepted, but with a tone so appalling it made even the local wildlife flee in terror. With obvious horror on their faces, the mayor grew furious and banished the wolves and Godfried from his domain. The wolves relocated to Abydos and its lovely coastal plains, where they worked for the local lords in their endless squabbles. Their incompetence doing little to endear Godfried to their plights, but gold was gold, and it was stacking up for Agatha's coming rise to power. Or so he thought. For Godfried, sitting by the fire one evening, struck up a conversation with his bodyguard Aristarchus about his daughter and her husband Sylvester's recent training regiments with the men, only to discover that Agatha had been increasingly absent from training. Scouring the tents for her to determine the root of the tardiness, Godfried discovered her in a daze amongst the equipment, a drink in hand toasting to no one, and wearing with her a stench of days unwashed and asleep in filth. Godfried realized then with shame that Agatha, his longtime pride and joy, was a drunk. On the 21st of April, 1221, the Mad Pope turned 100. Godfried received correspondence of this austere occasion alongside 17 of the usual letters he had received by then for decades. An eruption of laughter emerged from his belly. Bless that old fool. May he live 100 more, and may those letters, a puzzle only God himself could solve, never cease. On the 20th of June, 1223, Godfried broke up a fight between an ex-monk, Domenico, and his dear bodyguard, Aristarchus, over comments the monk had made. Tired from the night's excitement, Godfried decided to turn to his bed, when Ulrich, his youngest daughter, grabbed him by the shirt sleeve to whisper in his ear. Agatha had become increasingly jealous of the time Godfried was spending with Aristarchus, and in her ever-increasing drunkenness was evidently waylaying various men in the camp for aid in the bodyguard's murder. When Godfried came to confront her, she was asleep, with the damning correspondence not hard to find in the nest of her living space. The old wolf, with tears in his eyes, lifted her just as he did when she was a child. and carried her to a cell. The weight was heavy on Godfrey, who, tired after endless fights with his longtime wife Clara over their daughter's imprisonment, looked worn and downtrodden, ready for death. And he was. For on the 19th of September 1224, the old mercenary Godfrey the Wolf died in his sleep, the rule of the Wolves of the Blade passing to his daughter, Ulrich. It is from her this tale now comes. The letters kept coming from the Mad Pope Callistus III, but Ulrich noticed that one in particular was not like the others. On the 25th of April 1225, a crusade was called to retake a kingdom in Iberia from the Muslims. At the same time, another letter, one from Austria of all places, arrived bearing similar news, a crusade, yet this one was for Byzantium, and bearing a familiar name, a name which had haunted Godfried all his days, Eudokia, a woman who had once dreamed of ruling the Byzantine Empire, but who had likewise been dead for nearly 40 years. Could it be? Yet Ulrich did not pity or love the Greeks, and if they were to have an empress, why not a dead one? And so she agreed not to fight for the Mad Pope, but the mad Austrians who sought to put a ghost on the throne. The do-nothing Emperor Alexios III of the Byzantine Empire, in a state of total panic, sent a letter to Ulrich as she readied her men and ships for war, pleading with her to take a buyout. The Thema of Achaia, a prosperous land and desperate gambit by a soon-to-fall fool, so she thought. Ulrich threw the letter in the sea the next day. Her ships headed to the Greek shores. Shortly after, she was informed that the war would in fact be on behalf of Emperor Alexios III's son, Theodosius Komnenos. On the 5th of August, 1227, the Mad Pope died. The announcement came with an all-too-familiar letter. The same letter Ulrich herself had read 100 times, but signed under a different name, Alexander IV, a new pope, but the same curse. The Wolves of the Blade have arrived in Greece and have begun assaulting the land's western beaches. Agatha's husband, the old Sylvester, died in the opening assault, but Agatha did not grieve, nor did she take pity on herself as the wolves cut down Greeks by the thousands. Ulrich's heart sang to see her sister in battle, the only place now she seemed to escape from the bottle, and resemble the promise her father once saw long ago. Longtime Discord admin, Paladin YouTube member, and personal friend Dunyal was our next participant. The spiteful poet Mayor Ulrich was told died on the 16th of August 1229, whatever specter possessing him with such wrath finally at rest. The letters from the Pope were likewise to be burned upon delivery, Ulrich announced. The day of their humor and confusion was at an end. The crusade for Byzantium raged for years, but ultimately ended inconclusively on the 30th of January 1231, a white peace drawn up on both sides. The bitter taste of defeat and wasted lives remained on Ulrich's mind forever, her face a grimace whenever the word crusade was mentioned in her company. The death of her brother-in-law, more like a brother to her in her youth, and tales of shame from her own father's days in the Holy Land further cementing this loathing. On the 3rd of February 1233, hell opened its jaws wide, and Sigurd, first son of Godfried and sadistic monster, torturer of animals, and murderer, died. Though he did not enter much into this tale, no, he was unmourned, save perhaps by the pigs, who would have preferred to eat his ragged corpse. In May of the same year, Ulrich returned to Byzantium, suddenly prosperous under the once incompetent Emperor Alexios III, no doubt thanks to the culling of the land from the war, still bitter in Ulrich's mind. But Greek gold was as good as any other, and a land of stability was sure to have work in other fashion. War could wait. By September 1233, the precarious friendship between Ulrich and her drunken sister Agatha had officially ended. Be it their lack of fighting, the painful memory of the Crusades for Byzantium, or her hatred for Aristarchus, Agatha, after an explosive outburst, had cemented herself as a rival to her sister, who, from then on, cursed the pity that removed her sister from the cage of her deserved death years before. Much of Dune's run was thereafter spent doing contract work and bolstering the treasury in the Wolves' rank, but was otherwise mostly uneventful. On the 12th of June, 1235, a Bulgarian warrior named Mikhail met Ulrich. A fearless man with a heart of gold, he immediately melted the stubborn exterior of the she-wolf, and the two were wed. Their first son, Godfried, named for the old wolf, born on the 14th of December, 1236. By the end of Dune's run, Ulrich had befriended the Duke of Capua after assisting him in a holy war. Contracts he offered further expanding the coffers of the wolves for the next participant. Aiden, longtime Discord member and Godherja developer, is our next player. On the 22nd of February 1239, Ulrich met Duke Naziu in battle, fighting on behalf of his relative for her claim to the land. Ulrich and the wolves defeated his significant force with her well-trained but smaller regiment. But in 3 short months, Ulrich's luck would turn from bad to worse, as a ravenous disease known as the White Plague reached the wolves while they besieged Reggio Calabria, followed shortly after by King Pascal of Sicily's conquest of Duke Naziu's land, nullifying the wolves' contract, though they were still paid a pittance for their service. By the middle of May 1239, the wolves turned north to Byzantium once again in hopes of avoiding the plague, with Ulrich's second stepping down because of his illness, and her husband, brave Mikhail, rising to his place. On the 12th of June 1239, King Pascal sent a missive to Ulrich and the wolves, urging them to join his crusade for Tunisia, to which Ulrich, though hateful of crusades, couldn't refuse. The potential loot was too good to pass up. Yet Pascal would not live to see the war, dying of the plague on the 5th of August 1239, with the war completely cancelled outright by his infant son's advisor in September 1239. On the 21st of February 1241, the Emperor of Byzantium, who Ulrich long remembered as a bane of her father's later years, died peacefully in his sleep. The news followed nearly a year later with the death of the Great Khan on the 12th of February 1242, his forces having never breached the heart of Europe thanks in part to the departed Alexios III. The subsequent years were kind to Ulrich. Her and Mikhail welcomed their son Gregory on the 27th of July 1243 and a daughter Clara on the 29th of November 1245. The same year, a civil war erupted in Byzantium, and the wolves marched for Constantinople to ply their trade. For nearly 3 years, Ulrich and the wolves maintained peace throughout the land, hunting down bandits and protecting property and goods for various regional governors, eventually joining with Beylik Beg, a longtime friend of Ulrich and leader of a faction to install Lady Zuhal on the Byzantine throne. But by the 1st of December 1248, the wolves' outlook looks grim. Consumption has spread across Byzantium, and Ulrich, Mikhail, Gottfried, and Gregory, as well as several members of the wolves' camp, suffer from the disease. The apocalyptic plague ravaging without pity, known by all who dare to even speak its name as the White Pox. On the 5th of December 1248, Ulrich and the wolves, depleting by the day, moved camp to Ankara, where they hoped to wait out the plague for the call to arms against the throne, with Ulrich's friend Beg Kutlog. But Kutlog's dream of stable rule for Byzantium died with him on the 30th of September 1249, and the wolves departed with barely a gold piece for their wasted time, taking a contract to deliver a pilgrim's guide to the Holy Roman Emperor, Kaiser Frederick III himself, escaping the land of wasted potential and plague for hopefully the final time. While in the Holy Roman Empire, home of her ancestors, the ailing Ulrich made pilgrimage to Cologne Cathedral, but no prayer afforded relief, and by the new year 1251, Ulrich still suffered from the disease, having also lost her son Gottfried to the illness the year prior. The wolves spent the next year starving from lack of work and ailing from grief as well as the plague, ultimately resorting to thievery of pilgrims along the roads of Antioch, where Ulrich's physician claimed the dry weather would cure their ailments in October 1251. There the wolves eventually found more frequent work, though the stain of their crime weighed heavy on Ulrich's mind. Reports from local villagers told of violence against women done by Ulrich's men, with Ulrich's son Gregory being an unfortunate casualty, Mikhail and Ulrich finding the boy bruised and beaten. He remained shy and untrusting to the end of his days. Amazingly, during this period, emaciated and sick as she was, Ulrich delivered her second daughter, also named Ulrich, on the 24th of November, 1252. After winning a war on behalf of Emir Masud of Palmyra, Ulrich invested in better surgical equipment and tools from local Muslim experts for the wolves' camp physician to great success. By March 1253, Ulrich, Gregory, and Mikhail were miraculously cured of consumption, and the wolves spent the next 2 years doing contracts and resupplying in the area as the plague slowly loosened its grip on the wider world. On the 15th of August, 1255, Ulrich and the wolves arrived in Spoleta, Italy to visit Ulrich's cousins, only to find it a land embroiled in war between a greedy French adventurer Robin of the Halberds of Savoy and a local duchess, a German woman named Sophie. Ulrich, now 48 years old, contemplated the greed and pain of endless wars and travel, of watching her own relations suffering and the dead who were left behind. Though she would travel a bit through the Mediterranean shortly after on an escort contract, she received a letter from a relative of the area pleading for her aid, and returned to Italy in the winter of 1256, armed for war and conquest. If the local lords would not police the rogues that plagued their land, then Ulrich would. After nearly 80 years of wandering, House Krieger aimed to become landed. For the next year, while stationed in Ravenna, Ulrich and the wolves gathered support from the local prince bishop, aiding him in driving out overflow rabble from the raging wars of the French and German factions and ensuring his participation in the coming conflict. On the 1st of September 1256, with a combined force of some 3,000 strong, Ulrich marched directly for the camp of Duchess Sophie, gambling everything on a frontal assault in an effort to usurp the Duchess's claim and take the land for her own. In a stunning victory on the 14th of October 1256, the Duchess was captured and delivered to Ulrich's tent in chains, the war ending with a single battle, the final victory for the Wolves of the Blade, for with their disbandment, Ulrich became a landed lady. In the weeks that followed, Ulrich worked tirelessly to secure her position as a new noble in Spoleta, using her notoriety and prestige to marry her eldest daughter Clara to the Duke of Austria, heir apparent to the Holy Roman Empire, and her youngest daughter Ulrich to the Duke of Swabia. Though her previous enmity with German lords put her at odds with this choice, she knew better than most the value of good allies. On the 3rd of February 1257, Pope Alexander IV died, and was replaced by a German who immediately lambasted Ulrich for her conquest of the land and recent efforts in ridding central Italy of the French adventurer Robin, a man who had befriended the Pope years before. Enraged, Ulrich declared war on the Pope for her rightful duchy lands on the 17th of September 1257, calling in her new allies to the north, promising them whatever plunder they wished, so long as she remained lady, a duchess, to come. Though some scoffed at the upstart's disrespect towards the Holy Office, others saw it as a justified response to the Pope's arrogance. By the 1st of December 1258, Ulrich's forces are on the brink of victory, and poised to take the Duchy of Spoleto for their own. But rather than let the story end on a cliffhanger, I decided to jump in briefly to finish the war, which concluded on the 3rd of February 1259 in Ulrich's victory. Though I am tempted to continue, I think I prefer to leave it at that. This save is available on my Discord for anyone who wishes to continue, but with a powerful army and a good economy, I can see no reason why Ulrich and the Duchy of Spoleto couldn't easily carve out their own kingdom and fame for House Krieger in Italy and the lands beyond. in the years to come. But that is going to be it for me. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. This was definitely a challenge to put together. I was not sure how I was going to do these sections, but I'm quite proud of how this turned out, I think. But as always, I want to thank my channel members for their continued support. As you see, you're all on one screen right now. I'm sort of workshopping different ideas for this, so if you don't like it, it's probably not going to be permanent. In particular, I do want to thank my Paladin tier members. You should be on the screen too, but those are Dwayne the Rock Lobster, Zora Luigi, Dunyo, Valadar, Lackland, Grayzo, Ryzen, Titus, Furkan, J Dizzle, and Ghidorah. You guys are awesome. If you'd like to become a channel member, or if you've ever considered becoming a channel member, you can do so through the membership tab. Nights and above get videos 2 to 3 days early. And that is it for me. I hope you like this video. Cons of the Steppe comes out in a couple days, I think like a week from the release of this video, so I'm really looking forward to that. As always, I'm Soul, and I will happily see you in the next one.